Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is Hawkcast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. I'm your lead analyst and host, Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by publisher Adam Jacoby and managing editor Ross Binder. Hopefully, giving you a little bit of an escape from all the craziness that is social media and the national landscape right now. We will not be getting into that here on Hawkcast. Just Iowa sports for you here today on this Wednesday afternoon, previewing a little bit of that
Oh, what's been
UCLA
going on?
that UCLA game there in Los Angeles. If you forgot where they are, in case you forgot what Deshaun Foster said at Big Ten Media Days. And then also talking a little bit about men's basketball and women's basketball at Iowa. So, giving you a little bit of escape, we're happy to do so here on Hotcast. Before we start, make sure you hit that subscribe button, drop a like, drop a comment if you're listening there on YouTube, watching on YouTube. If you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, leave that rate and review. It does help us out a lot, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. So, let's get into it. As your lead analyst for men's basketball, that's where we're going to start and hopefully start off a little bit quicker, a little bit smoother than Iowa basketball the other night against Texas A&M Commerce. You guys saw the article, Ross. You edited it. I started it. The head was an inspiring 13 minutes because the previous 27 minutes were not inspiring at all. That team looked like they hadn't played basketball together all summer. They looked like a mixture of freshmen and upperclassmen that were transfers. It was rocky. Owen Freeman was the only post that really impressed me in the slightest in that game. You didn't have Seydou Traore. Just an ugly start overall. Ross, I know you read it. Adam, you chimed in there on the board too. I guess that's probably the number one thing that I would start with when talking about this men's team right now. Though there are other points that we're going to get to. That slow start just I'm not necessarily concerned about it, but it was bad. It was bad.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like they had some decent shots. They just weren't going in. So I think you probably just hope that, well, it was just a, off shooting night or shooting half maybe. And things did pick up in the second half. So, not, like you said, not something to be really concerned about yet, but definitely a little like, hey, hope this gets better fast because, Texas A&M Commerce was a pretty bad team. But there are teams coming up on the schedule that are significantly more talented than that, and there'll be much bigger tests for Iowa. So you'd want that slow start to be a thing of the past by then, and be able to get clicking from the jump. I think for that game, you mentioned Freeman. Like, yeah, that was thank God Freeman is there, and thank God Peyton Sandfort came back because otherwise that could have been a very tough game.
I was thinking about making that one of my three takeaways from the game. If you haven't seen that, that's what we do on Hawkeye Beacon. Rather than doing a recap, like this isn't the newspaper from the 50s. We're giving you analysis, we're giving you thoughts from ourselves, but also from the team and from Fran. So stay tuned for that post game from myself for men's basketball, from Adam for women's basketball, and that I thought about that in the first half. I typing out thank God Peyton came back because for a while he and Owen were like the only bright spots. And kind of thank God Owen came back too because he said other programs were trying to get him out of the or get him to enter the portal to leave, which how can you blame him? But at the same time, he was really again the only bright spot in the post. And I have talked about that on the board. I talked about it in the article a little bit. I think Lodgy should come off the bench at the five. Seydou, when healthy, should probably start at the four. And you intermingle Cooper down there, and then Peyton plays a little bit of the four too. Again, these aren't things that I would say I'm concerned about. What I said on the board and what I'm saying here is you notice at this point in the season. It's a long season. You got a while till you even get to conference play. You notice it, you take note of it, you move on, and as a team, you're thinking, you're looking at that team, and they've got to be hoping and thinking that they can correct some of these issues that have started the season. And sometimes it's going to be personnel, it's going to be lineups. How do you adjust?
Yeah, and one of the things that really sort of concerned me about Iowa's bigs rotation against Commerce was the fact that, yeah, we were talking about one of the worst teams in Division One, and they didn't have a whole lot of reason to be scared of the defense from Dembele or from Evan Bronze for that matter. And so when your more athletic guys off the bench don't really give opponents who are not even Big Ten caliber opponents, not even mid-major, we're talking low major here, when they don't have a reason to fear them defensively, when they already have the physical disadvantage, when you're going up against guys that are future NBA talent, that should give you a lot of pause, especially when you're talking about when it's time to start whittling that rotation down to your best seven, your best eight, right? And right now, as it stands, I am not sure that the best eight includes bronze. And I'm, well, if we're talking best seven, I'm not sure that that includes Dembele at this point either, just because I haven't seen that really translate into production on the court yet this season. And now, granted, it's been 2 games against lower competition, but if he does play, up to his competition as well, hopefully we see it soon.
And a couple before we hit the doomsday button again, this is just things we've noted, but two positives that I want to talk about before we segue into women's basketball is Drew Thelwell looked way better than he did in the exhibition game. He looked like the player that they brought in from the portal and what they wanted to see from that player from Morehead State, a guy who plays defense, who is athletic, who knows how to win, right? Like those are the three big things. A big guard, because Fran has an affinity for small guards for some reason. I don't know, I can't figure it out. But Brock Harding being one of those. And Thelwell was really good off the bench. Bryce Sanford, who I spoke to people behind the scenes and had heard that he had taken a huge jump this offseason. That continues to be a thread to follow along with that appears like some good intel we got there at Hawkeye Beacon. And if you want to be privy to that information, we've got it at iowa.rivals.com. Just go /subscribe and you can join us today. We had just a recent conversation on the board from somebody who joined us that's new. That's like, man, this is awesome. This is where I want to be. This is the type of conversations we're having. Used to be with a different site. They're happy to join us. So we'd love to have you join over there. So positive things from Price and from Thelwell. If you want to see more expanded thoughts on that, you can check out my post game story at iowa.rivals.com. So let's segue a little bit to women's basketball just because we got to get moving. We got to talk about football too. But Adam, season starts tonight versus Northern Illinois. It's the official start of the season, not an exhibition game. We talked about how we wanted to go about this just because it's pregame and a lot of people are going to be listening postgame. What are you watching for tonight? What do you think people could look back on from this game and digest going forward in this early part of the season?
Yeah, I think the big headline here is obviously going to be the official debut of Lucy Olson, the transfer from Villanova, who had been third in the NCAA in scoring last year. Really going to shore up that point guard position for the Hawkeyes in the post Caitlin Clark world, and especially as they sort of reshape and reform how this offense is going to operate, they're also going to need a whole lot more from Kylie Fierbach as opposed to just being a spot shooter, right? She's going to use more of her skill set. So uh, I thought Olsen looked really good against Missouri Western in the exhibition, but obviously, all that proves is that she would do really well against D2 competition, right? Like D2 All-American material right there. So now that she's, coming from Villanova too, where she was a tremendous scorer, there's no real question about her talent level, but how well she ingratiates with the rest of the Hawkeye offense, this is going to be a tougher test for that. And, especially as sort of a later transfer in the year as well. And not really having the opportunity to practice with Hannah Stulke and Sita Folter up until, well, a few days ago when a Folter returned to practice. So that is going to be the key for the Hawkeyes this season is just reintegrating their big three together, getting them practicing for the first time, and sort of learning on the fly and hopefully playing their best basketball by March.
Ross, I don't know about you. I watched the exhibition for the ladies as well against Missouri Western, which, fun fact, my sister and her husband's alma mater there in St. Joe, Missouri. I have no offense to the great people of St. Joe or Fort Dodge, Iowa, but those two cities remind me of each other. I did not go to Missouri Western and for a good reason. So, um, the one tweet that I put up from the game when I was watching the exhibition was spoiler alert, Lucy Olson's good. Like that's that's pretty much. And Hannah Stolke stepped out and hit some threes too. Were you surprised by that, Adam? Or I know you've been plugged in with women's basketball, so is that something you've been hearing behind the scenes?
We absolutely had been hearing behind the scenes that while Stolke was rehabbing her knee surgery over the course of the off season, she isn't able to uh, run or even jog, but she can, spot shoot, work on her mechanics, and yeah, the staff had been looking forward to getting more of a three-pointer from her this season. Now, granted, again, stepping out against Missouri Western is a little bit different than stepping out against UCLA, right? So ultimately, it's really going to come down to whether or not she can be consistent in game time and really force defenses to respect that shot, as well as how actually productive she is with it, how often she actually shoots it. But as they transition her more to the four spot, which is more of her natural position, and now that they have Ava Hayden at the five, and they're starting to trust Addie O'Grady, who will actually be starting in this opener at the five. But that rotation is another thing to watch for this team. But ultimately, that rotation, what it does is helps Stolke play the four more, and you're more effective for when defenses have to respect the 3-point shot. And so, is it a mirage that she, hit one against Missouri Western? We'll see. But that's also going to be one of the things to really look forward to, not only from this game, which will be over by the time most of the people, if not all the people listen to this podcast, but it's something to watch for over the course of the season as well.
So talking about the rotation of the bigs, I think I saw that Addie O'Grady is going to be starting again
Yeah.
this coming game. What's your thinking behind that move, Adam? Other than, I mean, seniority, like
There is a little bit of that, and there is a little bit of the fact that Hayden missed a little time or was limited in practice with illness very close to the start of the season. And so that illness was a reason that Jensen mentioned that O'Grady would start the opener, or excuse me, the exhibition. But the fact that this has carried into the regular season opener as well, and Jensen is also not talking about Hayden in a way that she had been during media day. And during media day, it was more of a, well, Ava's really starting to distance herself. And now the messaging is nobody's really distancing themselves. And we've seen O'Grady look better in a few practice clips in the time that we got to watch open practice. Like she's got some seniority. And in an offense like this, the seniority matters a lot because you're familiar with what Jan Jensen's trying to say, what she's trying to teach, much more than a true freshman would be, even though those sort of recruiting relationships carry on, years past. You're still the one that's been in that practice gym for years and years more than a true freshman, even though Hayden is the more athletic of the two, the bouncier, the more tenacious rebounder on top of that. But it does sound like O'Grady is really showing some veteran leadership on the court in practice and playing the way that Jensen expects bigs to play. So this is ultimately going to be beneficial, and Jensen mentioned as much. It's going to be beneficial for both Hayden and O'Grady to have this be as competitive as possible throughout the course of the season. One, because obviously sharpens iron, and two, it helps Hayden come along and understand the caliber of competition that is going to be facing her in the Big Ten night after night after night. And there are going to be some games where one of those centers is having a better game than the other, right? There's going to be games where they need all 10 fouls from both of them. So ultimately, this is going to be sort of a growth opportunity for both of these centers, even though the battle for starter, which even Jensen doesn't care that much about. But even though I think this battle is going to go on for most of the season.
for all the basketball intellectuals, it's not about who starts, it's about who finishes. That's uh that's a classic one there. So we get to move over to football now. Let's do it. Okay. Not a ton of stuff to talk about pre-game going into this week, like there was last week when Brendan Sullivan was named the starter for the first time. However, he's starter again. Obviously, no Marco Linez on the depth chart. That was something that we had before it really went public there on Hawkeye Beacon. So again, another reason to join us there for as a premium subscriber. But Sullivan, once again, the starter, seems just as confident. Talking to him yesterday. Um, and I mean, the guys believe in him. Like, I don't know that there's there's much to say on that other than Cade's out again. I don't believe he's traveling with the team, and that's why Logan Jones will serve as a captain instead of him, which I'm sure nobody freaked out over that on Twitter yesterday. But yeah, so I mean, do you guys have anything else to add on that quarterback conversation?
You have something, Adam? I mean,
Well, I'm personally shocked that Brendan Sullivan's confidence is steady as ever because you wouldn't expect it from a shrinking violet like him. No, it's unfortunate that McNamara is not able to go, not able to travel with the team, which is why you would have somebody be the captain in his place, right? You don't name four captains and then show up with three. So it's unfortunate for a couple of reasons. One, because sort of a bummer for McNamara personally that his symptoms and anybody who's ever suffered concussion symptoms know that those are awful to deal with. And so the fact that they are continuing to affect his quality of life to the point that he's not able to travel with the team, bummer for him. Bummer for Iowa football too, because he is, especially with Linez now injured and out for the what we expect the duration of the regular season here. McNamara is comfortably the second best quarterback on Iowa's roster. And that is somebody that you would really like to have available, especially with a mobile, we'll say it just sort of a risk-taking sort of QB like Brendan Sullivan. He's not reckless by any stretch of the imagination, but that's a lot of running around. That is a lot of athleticism that would really not respond well to, say, pulling a hamstring or spraining an ankle. So there's always a little bit of risk when you see him take off, when you see him, sort of getting close to that contact. So yeah, it's bad for Iowa football that Cade McNamara is not cleared yet. So that seemed pretty interesting to me.
yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I would agree with that, Adam. And it does at least short circuit the conversation around oh, if Cade's healthy, is he plugged back into the starting quarterback that has been on the minds of fans, I think. But so we don't have to worry about that until after the bye week. It is once again the Sullivan show, and but you're right, the depth chart after him is quite empty. Not literally. Jackson Stratton is the guy on the depth chart after Brennan Sullivan, but in terms of familiarity or guys who gotten snaps in with the offense, it is very light. So you just want to see Brendan stay healthy on Friday night for sure.
It is the depths chart at that point.
Yeah, so we've got Intel. Obviously, Kyler Girardi is third string. We well, I don't know if you'd call him third string so much as emergency situation quarterback for Iowa, as well as a few others involved. If you want to know those names, we've got those on Hawkeye Beacon as well. But Stratton is kind of a mystery right now for anybody and everybody involved in Iowa media, Iowa football. He's getting those two reps, and supposedly, according to Brendan, he's really taking advantage. And those are going to be really valuable reps right now that he was not getting before. So, other thoughts and
He
intel on
was
Stratton?
he was running the scout team earlier this year, right, Eliot?
I think so.
I think that's right.
If it wasn't
Yeah.
him, it was Rezar, and they decided to change
Right.
position.
And I mean
So,
he switched over to wide receiver
right.
pretty soon,
So
it sounded like. So
yeah. So with Stratton, if you don't know much about him, of course we've got all our articles about him that we got together when he made his decision. But stat wise, not a great time at Colorado State. 4 of 17 for 78 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. So not a stellar resume for Jackson Stratton. Previously committed to Washington before he decided on Colorado State. Committed to Washington before they hired Kalen DeBoer, and then DeBoer's staff came in and said, "Sorry, see ya." And he was graduating early, so he had to flip and went to Colorado State. So a unique situation. He's a walk-on. I guess his nickname is Shaggy because he looks like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. That's something that Kirk shared with us yesterday. So a unique situation, and you can't get to this level without some level of arm talent. So apparently he's got a little bit of that. So it's just about figuring things out from there. But other note, when he was in the portal, he received scholarship offers from Utah Tech and Abilene Christian, and chose to walk on at Iowa rather than take a scholarship offer from where Deacon Hill ended up. And previously, there's another Iowa quarterback that went to Abilene. Did Mansell, Peyton Mansell,
I
I,
end
think
th-
up
I
there?
think it was
so.
Carson May.
Or was it May?
I think.
I think
Ross, who did you think it was?
I thought it was Mandel too. Peyton.
Oh, Jimmy
we're one of
Christmas.
us is gonna have to. Are you looking this up, Adam?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
Abilene
looking
Christian, Peyton Mansell. I think
Oh,
Carson.
May was Wyoming.
2 points for Eliot and I.
Well, I think
Yeah. My
he.
apologies to Carson and his family, the May family as a whole.
No, Carson's also at Abilene Christian.
Okay, thank
Two,
you.
2 points for all
Carson
of us.
Carson started at Iowa for 1 semester,
Yeah.
transferred to a community college for 1 semester, transferred to Wyoming for 1 semester, and has been at Abilene Christian for 1 semester. So Carson's kind of been all over the place. He was a 4-star recruit for us, so a bit of an odd situation there. I want to look at Carson now that we're on this topic. I want to look at Carson's offer list out of high school, given that he chose Iowa as a 4-star recruit at quarterback. Big dude. Big
Yeah.
dude. I think he was a little bit more mobile than people give him credit for, too, if I remember correctly. But his
Oh,
other power, he had, what the hell? Either our offer list was not updated for him or something, because his only other offers were from Old Dominion and Western Michigan. He had Power Four interest from Houston, Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State. Ken O'Keefe was his primary recruiter. So um, do with that information what you will. This is not a Carson May podcast. Back to Iowa football. Um,
so
yeah,
there's a
not
lot of interconnections between Iowa and Utah Tech and Abilene Christian at the quarterback position, which
yeah,
I'm not sure that's the waters a Big Ten program wants to be
Um,
playing in necessarily.
you would hope it's zero.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the UCLA preview. Coming up, Iowa will take on the Bruins at 8 p.m. Central Time out there in Southern California. We
I
know Iowa's history playing out west, so not ideal.
got a trivia question for Adam about UCLA. Do you
Okay.
know when the last time, and this is for Adam because you're too young, Elliot. Do you know when the last time Iowa played UCLA?
Oh, don't tell me. Don't tell me it was the Ronnie Harmon game.
It was
Oh
1986.
boy.
I'm excited. We've got another year of opponents where Iowa's playing these new Big Ten teams that Iowa hasn't played them since before Eliot was born. So it's just a really exciting development we've got here. But
10
yeah, the
years,
Ronnie Harmon game was the
10,
last UCLA game. So
10 years before I was born.
And this
Well,
podcast is over permanently. Goodbye, everybody.
please don't unlike us for mentioning Ronnie Harmon, please.
Yeah, everybody already pressed stop.
We apologize.
So
We apologize to the 3 remaining listeners who are still fumbling for their iPhone.
now, almost 30 years, well, almost 40 years now, past that last game. Sorry to make you all
28.
cringe, specifically Adam. God, you guys are old. Okay,
We know. We know.
Okay, sorry. Now,
It's all
almost
right.
40 years later, for Iowa and UCLA facing off again, this time in the Rose Bowl in the regular season, which just still pretty weird. But Iowa taking on UCLA, a weird team too this year, 3-5. Ross and I, you and I were looking at the schedule. Tell us a little bit about the the oddity that is UCLA's schedule right now and how it's
Yeah,
played out.
yeah, really weird. Like you said, 3-5. They're actually 0-3 in home games this season. Heading into this one, they lost to Indiana, came out there and beat them. Oregon came out there and beat them, and then Minnesota was the third team that came out to Pasadena and got a win. Obviously, two of those teams are in the top 10 in the college football playoff, the rankings. So, not a shock that they would go out there and beat UCLA. And Minnesota's had their moments this season, so you can kind of see it. Rutgers, UCLA is coming off. They got 2-game winning streak heading into this game, both on the road. They beat Rutgers out in New Jersey, which got to be the Big Ten's longest road trip. I mean, Los Angeles to New Jersey. But anyway, then they beat Nebraska last week, which was a good win for the Bruins. So they, should have a little positive momentum, I would say, heading into this game. They, were really struggling earlier in the year, especially scoring the ball. They did not crack 20 points in a game until that Rutgers win, actually, when they scored over 30. But otherwise, they have had the Big Ten's worst scoring offense this season. But it has again looked a little better the last 2 weeks. So this is not quite the same floundering UCLA team from September, perhaps.
That
Now I'm curious whether it's a longer uh, conference matchup between Rutgers and UCLA or Cal and Boston College. Those are both conference games. What are we doing here? Sorry. Anyway,
Cal Cal definitely should be in the Big 12 if they were going to realign. Like, what the hell? SMU too. Their aesthetic is more Big 12 than ACC.
yeah, but
There's
that's
already
classic Southwest Conference
and
stuff
there's
right
already
there. Like,
six other
get the
Texas
band back
teams,
together. Yeah.
already six other Texas teams in the Big 12. But we digress.
That that UCLA win over Rutgers is suddenly pretty impressive. That game was at 11 a.m. Or noon Eastern. That's like what?
9 a.m. UCLA time.
Yeah, and they had to travel all the
Yeah.
way the hell out there. That's
Yeah, that's a good
crazy.
win. Really good win for them.
And Rutgers was previously not terrible to start the season, and now they're terrible. But like, that's an indicative win as to who Rutgers is and how good they are. They beat Washington. And I think that was at home, and that's another time change that was brutal for Washington. But UCLA just barely won that game, 35-32 over Rutgers.
Yeah, one thing we mentioned with Iowa playing Washington last month was, teams traveling for these, the West teams coming east and vice versa. There had not been a lot of success for the traveling team in those games. That's turned around a little bit in the 2 or 3 weeks since that Washington game, partially with, teams like Oregon traveling and winning because, hey, they're just really good. So it doesn't really matter if they're playing in West Lafayette or playing in Ann Arbor, they're still just better than the team they're playing. So that kind of evens out the travel issues. But hopefully that gives a little, maybe Iowa's not quite as disadvantaged by the travel as we were seeing from teams earlier. You mentioned at the start of our discussion here, Eliot, like traveling west has not been a good thing for the Hawkeyes under Kirk Ferentz. With a few the Holiday Bowl against USC about 5 years ago was a very notable exception to that. Iowa played phenomenal, one of the highlights of the Brian Ferentz era as offensive coordinator, honestly. But the regular season trips Iowa made out to Arizona, Arizona State, debacles to put it mildly. The other trip to the Rose Bowl during the Kirk Ferentz era, I swear I'm not trying to get you to dislike us, but not good. So this is not, there's a reason Ferentz does not schedule West Coast road trips or has not until, now he doesn't have a choice. The Big Ten just mandates it. So There's a lot of trap game energy with this one, though. You know, Friday night on the road, on the West Coast, just different prep for Iowa. A lot of things to not like. What do you think, Adam?
Yep. Yeah, Ross, this might be the first podcast that's demonetized for swears that the listeners are saying after all those games that you were bringing up. No, yeah, and on top of all that, it's a short week, right? So this is really going to be a test for Brendan Sullivan, who, famously has terrible work ethic, habits that we never hear about from teammates. No, like this is sort of time for him being the first guy in the room, which we were hearing, since beginning in the off season, being the last guy out, all that. This is time for all that film prep work to really come out because again, yeah, we're talking about a trip out west, which has historically famously been difficult for Iowa. It's a short week, and if there's anything to feel different about, it's the fact that the body clock difference and the how well the rest of the Big Ten has done with these long travel um, slates in front of them. It will be top of mind for players in a way that I don't think it would have been back in the 90s, back in the 2000s, back when it is, sort of bowl games only. Now at the very least, they understand the fact that more often than not, the teams that are traveling are losing and often losing by a lot. And so this is really an opportunity for Sullivan to be that leader, to be somebody that's guiding them through the short practice schedule, obviously doing his own film work on top of that, really getting prepared. So it's going to be interesting to see how well Iowa shows up for that game. And then on top of that, yeah, the UCLA in terms of what they present on offense and defense is going to be a little bit of a unique challenge. Eliot, do you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah. This is a unique situation with how things have gone, especially for UCLA, especially with the time changes, especially with the history going out west. It's just an odd game. I think did all three of us pick Iowa to lose this game at the beginning of the season, like when we were doing the schedule review? I know I did.
It was in my pocket of they're going to lose one of X. Yeah, like one of my two game pockets.
I don't remember if I specifically said Iowa would lose this game, but I think because this was right after that Wisconsin home game, I kind of thought Iowa would probably drop one of them, is my recollection from our
Okay.
discussion. So, just thought that that turnaround, West Coast, etc., like it just felt like a lot for that two games. So, yeah, the scheduling and yeah, so we haven't felt good about this game since, dating back to August, really.
Yeah,
And
because we were worried about how physical Wisconsin would play in that game,
Yeah.
right?
and we were wrong. That's why things can change preseason to in season for sure. Uh, we might very well be completely wrong about this one too. UCLA is just such an odd team with their scheduling, with how they've played lately. So we talked about it. Before we get into our keys, uh, Ethan Garbers, quarterback for UCLA, is a big reason why they've won these two games in a row. He started the season through the air with 4 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. In the last two games, he's gone 6 touch. I'll read his stats: 49 of 63 for 602 yards and 6 touchdowns. Like a 2 game stretch like that, Iowa would kill for that. Even something remotely close to it.
And he did that against Rutgers and Nebraska, who don't have like it's not like they're not the worst defenses in the conference by far. Like Nebraska has had a very solid defense this year. So yeah, to play as well as he has the last 2 weeks is definitely, I'm sure the defense in the secondary especially has really taken note of that in film study this week. That hey, this is a guy who is playing with a lot of confidence and playing at a high level. Yeah, I mean, he was completing like over 80% of his passes against Rutgers, which at any level to compete that percentage of your passes that's a good day, really good day.
Yeah. So he's playing really well. That was something that we needed to note before we got into keys, and so we'll do that now. Also noting before we do that, the run game has been terrible for UCLA. For a coach who was an NFL running back, and a good one in Deshaun Foster. Ross, you had those stats pulled up for the running game. Are you getting those up right now?
Yeah, I got him again. So the UCLA running game, 591 yards this season, the worst in the Big Ten by far, at 74 yards a game. TJ Harden leading the team with 226. Jalen Berger second on the team with 148. And that's just a little notable because so he has 148 for the season. Caleb Johnson has 4 games this season where he's run for more yards than that, and certainly could have had even more had Iowa, utilized him a little bit more. He had 135 against Wisconsin last week, and took most of the fourth quarter off. So just not good running the ball at all in Westwood this year. So it's going to be interesting for the Iowa defense because this looks like an extremely one-dimensional offense. You mentioned Garbers, sorry, the quarterback, and he's been playing very well the last few games. So, the going to be targeting the secondary a lot. Deshaun Lee going to be very busy, you would think, on Friday night. But Iowa historically under Phil Parker has had quite a bit of success against one-dimensional offenses. So I think that's really something to watch. If they're not able to run the ball, and very not much suggests they're able to run the ball this year. Like, the numbers are what they are, and they're elite. So they're going to have to throw the ball on Iowa. And like I said, Iowa's been good when they know exactly what the offense is going to try to do. So what do you think, Adam?
Yeah, the fact that they're not even getting more than 3.5 yards a pop from Harden and Berger, which, by the way, old friend alert from Wisconsin there. But the fact that they are not getting explosive plays from them either. I mean, the longest rush that either of them have for the entire season, and we're 8 games in, is 21 yards. So they're not popping explosive plays out of the rush game, like Iowa fans are used to by now. They are not really grinding the chains by any stretch of the imagination either. It's just not an effective rush game for them. And so, yes, it is a situation where Iowa has to sort of assume that they're going to be one dimensional, so, or at the very least, uh, prepare for that to be the more effective option for that offense. So that's going to mean more snaps for Brian Allen. That's going to mean more snaps for Max Llewellyn, right? And what's also fascinating is this is sort of the same situation on the defensive side when Iowa's got the ball too, because UCLA gives up only about 100 yards passing per game, or excuse me, rushing per game, but they give up 260, I believe, passing per game. So, like, it is almost like the Northwestern situation, but even more pronounced. So it's a situation where Iowa sort of has to prepare the same way as they did for Northwestern. Not exactly the same way, but they have to prepare for a defense that will be selling out to stop Caleb Johnson, but that will be really struggling, especially with a mobile option at QB like Sullivan. And so he's going to have to use that mobility, put the defense into unfamiliar positions in the secondary, have to make the choice between peeling off or, staying in coverage. And, he's really got to punish defenses with some mismatches and when they find themselves in mismatches. So very curious to see how that plays itself out.
Okay. Now let's actually get into our keys like 10 minutes after I said it. Ross, what's your key going into this game for Iowa to get a victory?
Mine is actually building off what Adam just said, which is kind of, which for Iowa on offense, is their strength better than, UCLA's strength, or is their weakness stronger than UCLA's weakness, really? Because it's strength versus strength in the running game. Iowa has a great running offense. UCLA is number 3 in the Big Ten in rush defense, though, so they have been very effective at slowing teams down on the ground. Vice versa, Iowa, not a good passing offense this year. And UCLA has had a very porous passing offense. So is this a game, do we see Sullivan air it out a little bit more? He threw 2 passes in the second half against Wisconsin. I would be a little shocked if that stat duplicated itself against UCLA. If it does, I'm guessing it means that the running game has not been having much difficulty with the UCLA run defense, and Sullivan's working it, and obviously Caleb is doing well, and so on. So that's the key for me is, can the run game get traction? against that UCLA run defense. They've looked extremely good the last 6 quarters or so, going 7 quarters. Once they kind of found their mojo against Northwestern, and really good against Wisconsin last week. So, can they keep that up going on the road, playing a good run defense? Or, can their pass game, which again has not been particularly explosive or productive this season, but they are playing a very forgiving pass defense in UCLA. Can they use that to their advantage? Seth Anderson, is this a breakout game for him? Maybe. Is it? Who's that's going to be what I'm watching.
Adam.
Well, it could have been a breakout game for Seth Anderson against Northwestern, certainly the way that they were targeting him early on there too. So yeah, I think he is a pretty good pick to click against UCLA as well. I think certainly he's one of the most explosive options in the Iowa wide receiver room, especially with Reese Vanderzee still out. My key for the game is
One thing. Sorry, you mentioned Reese Vanderzee being out. I thought Jarriett Bowie was pretty good the other day, in lieu of
sure.
him being out. He had that one drop. Somebody said on T or that on TV, it looked like it was behind him and it was a tough catch. But I
Yeah,
thought
it
he was
was
pretty
well
good.
behind him.
It
Yeah.
was it?
Yeah, I
Okay.
thought so too. Yeah, and certainly he is a guy that you would also love to see get going too. But it really does look like they've been trusting Seth more and more on the longer sort of chunk pass plays.
Yeah, getting him back was at that time was really positive in losing Caleb Brown, though he didn't play much, and also losing RVZ to injury too. So sorry I interrupted, Adam. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So what I'm looking for in this game especially is the big play defense because we're talking about a UCLA team that is -5 in turnovers. They've committed 12 on the year. Like you mentioned, you can get Garbers to throw interceptions. And just because Nebraska wasn't able to get a pick out of him doesn't mean Iowa's not going to be able to get a pick out of him, or certainly doesn't mean that Iowa shouldn't expect it. So ultimately, though, you do actually have to force those turnovers because UCLA, once they get in scoring position, pretty consistent in how they finish their drives. Especially their field goal kicker is 10 out of 10 from inside of 40. So you don't want to bend so much that they get into scoring range because that's when they turn it into points. What you want to do is force some turnovers, force some big negative plays. And, Garbers has also been sacked 20 times in 8 games. You can get to him. You can take him down. This isn't a child situation, even though he does have a little bit of burst. Ultimately, this has to be another one of those classic Iowa defensive games where they say, all right, we know that you're not going to be able to rush for a ton of yardage on us. It's time to disguise a few coverages, make Garbers think some throws are going to be open, and then step in front of them. And, Phil Parker has earned as much trust and benefit of the doubt on that as anybody in the nation. So ultimately, though, it is going to be up to, like you said, Deshaun Lee. This is going to be a big game for him to build on what he was starting against Northwestern and really solidify that CB2 position. So that's my big key for the game.
I
Say,
have on.
Adam, I'm sorry, I just want to add, do you think this is a game where like Jackson and Higgins maybe get used to blitz a little bit more to get to Garbers and force some of those big plays, mistakes on defense?
Yeah, absolutely. And a big part of that is how disruptive they are to the pass game, even when they're not necessarily, recording a sack or even recording a QB hurry. Some of it's just sort of dumb luck interceptions like they've been doing by batting the ball up at the line. And so the fact that they've turned into this weird quasi honey badger linebacker role where they're just making plays however they can in this like ultra chaotic way. Yeah, absolutely. That's sort of a situation where you want to keep throwing them at the line, keep confusing an offensive line like UCLA's, and maybe spring somebody open for a shot on Garbers. And again, especially when we're talking about a defense that is so unproductive in the run that you can start to bring out your pass play package more often, not even necessarily on 3rd and long, where you can say, well, all right, it's 2nd and 15. We know what to expect here. And then you start to bring out those big play engine guys that you have on that line and who have really been key to Iowa reestablishing itself on 3rd downs and on defense as a whole in these last few games.
So you mentioned it was just one quick thing. 20 sacks. What I see on UCLA's website is their opponents have sacked Garbers, or I guess whoever's playing quarterback 22 times this year. So just
Yeah, there's a second QB, Justin
oh, there
Martin,
you go.
some
Okay.
backup.
So
Yep.
22 sacks this year on UCLA. That was some a very minor detail, but more sacks. So their offensive line doesn't appear to be good, is essentially what we're getting at. And that being a factor in my key too, it's like who the hell is Ethan Garbers? Is he this 6 touchdowns, 0 picks, 600 yards, completing almost 80% of his passes quarterback, or is he 4 touchdowns to 9 interceptions quarterback against a better defense? I mean, and Nebraska and Rutgers are kind of known for their defense, even though Nebraska's been on a downward trajectory, and Rutgers has also been on a downward trajectory. They are still known for their defense with these current this current roster that each of them have, and their coaches for that matter. So does another defensive oriented team go out to UCLA and struggle against Garbers, who is, I'm assuming, an upperclassman for them? I'd have to look at their roster, but let me look it up here quick. Come on. Yes, he is a redshirt
Senior.
senior. So, yep,
Yeah.
yep, just found that. So, is this a situation where he stays hot and there's only so much Iowa can do about it? Are we looking at this Aiden Childs game against Michigan State and saying, "What the hell? It happened again." Like what are we going to be seeing here with Ethan Garbers at under center for UCLA? Because I have those stats that you shared, Ross, in the run game. I have little to negative faith in UCLA's run game and what they're doing. So it's got to all be on Garbers. Can he make something happen? Does Iowa have another situation where there are issues with tackles? Like what's going to happen? And how much does that time change issue factor in? It's an 8 p.m. kick for us here in Central Time, so that's not great. What'd you have, Adam?
So one more thing to point out here, what it's really going to come down to me is whether Iowa can get home on its blitzes. Because what's sort of fascinating is the difference between when Garbers is kept clean. According, these are going to be some PFS stats, but he grades out as an 88.7 quarterback altogether when he's kept clean, but down to 41.1 when he's under pressure. Well, okay, but what that also means is so you would expect when blitzed for his rating to go down. Not so. So he's an 88.8 when blitzed, 52.1 when not blitzed. So what this means is if Iowa can force pressure with its front four, still have its total secondary package, coverage package going on, that is how you're going to be able to create turnovers. So again, it's going to come back to not only when Iowa has its 4 defensive end lineup in there, but also how much productivity do they get from Aaron Graves? How much productivity do they get from YA Black, right? We've seen them start to make some more big plays in those passing downs as well. They're probably going to have another big day to really disrupt what Garbers is going to try to do. So I thought that was fascinating.
There you go. And Iowa will take on the Bruins again at 8 p.m. in California, in Los Angeles, coming up here on Friday. So we will be watching on TV. That is quite a travel and quite a busy time for us with men's basketball, women's basketball, and football. But we will have all that coverage plus more at Iowa Hawkeye, or excuse me, at Iowa Hawkeye, at iowa.rivals.com and Hawkeye Beacon. We'd love to have you join us there. Just use that link. It's always in the description on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening. iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. So we're going to have post-game intel as well. And of course, we're going to keep tabs on recruiting, men's basketball, women's basketball, and all of that there for you at Hawkeye Beacon. While you're here on YouTube, be patient because this is the third week in a row that I have not gotten us to to, score predictions before I start to wrap it up. Golly, get it together, Elliot. Holy shit. Okay, there's this game this weekend between the Hawkeyes and the Bruins. Guys, let's make it quick here, and so we can get our folks who are listening out of here. What are you thinking for final scores, and who takes it? What are you expecting for this game, Ross?
All right. I will go with the Hawkeyes, and I'm going to go with a score of 27 to 13. Um,
Okay. That's not precisely what I was going to guess. I was going to say 27-16, but yeah, sort of the same boat there.
Well, before I share my prediction, Iowa opened at 6.5 point favorites. They're now 5.5 point favorites at the over under at 44.5. It opened at 45.5. So solid guesses. I'm gonna say, oh, 30 to 13. So again, we're all in the same general area. Um, hammer the under, I guess, is where we're all at, which is unique for Iowa football this year. All those games of 38 plus points.
Hashtag Iowa overs, baby.
That's true. It doesn't feel good to be on the under since they've been going over almost every game this year. But
It just feels a little gross, you know? Like this
yeah, I
is
just
who are we with all these overs and yeah. Ugh.
What happened to the game I love?
What happened to the identity of Hawkeye Beacon? Oh. So, as I was saying, okay, now drop your score predictions there in the comments on YouTube and let us know what you're thinking. Who wins, why, and final score predictions, Iowa or UCLA. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave that rate and review, hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode, all that. I'm really hoping 2 weeks from now when we do our preview pod for Maryland that I actually get a timely score prediction for us. So stay tuned for that. Again, all of our premium content is at iowa.rivals.com. Click that link in the description if you want to sign up. And as always, we've got our recent articles there in the description as well. So if you're looking for some of that content that we mentioned today, just scroll on down and you'll find it there. So once again, folks, I am Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Ross Binder, managing editor of the site, and Adam Jacoby, our publisher. For now, we will see you next time.